Today on Locked On Dolphins, we shift our focus to the defensive side of the ball to look at a post-OTAs 53-man projection for the year ahead.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and an NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We're doing 53-man forecast. We did the 25 players on the offensive side of the ball yesterday on the show. If you missed it, we'll check it out. Nice little composition of roster with some tough decisions to be made amongst the collective skill group. Wishing there was at least one more harder decision to make with the bottom of the offensive line group. But I like that I kept the number of 25 because it gives you an even 25-25 split between offense and defense. You, of course, have your three specialists. I won't bury the lead. We'll do specialists now. Jason Sanders, kicker. Joe Cardona, the only long snapper who knew special teams coordinator Craig Aukerman couldn't have been more excited about when talking about him in his press conference. So assume Cardona is going to be the long snapper. And then I do think Ryan Stonehouse beats out Jake Bailey, especially considering the Dolphins can save about $2 million in cap space from moving on from Bailey, and Stonehouse, a former All-Pro punter. Yeah, I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying. So those three specialists in tow, that leaves 25 players on the defensive side of the ball to give your attention to. And we're going to split it with trenches, cornerback next, because that's the complex room, and then linebacker and safety to finish, just because it's that kind of that middle core of the back seven. So we'll start up front. I do have 11 defensive linemen being kept on this 53 forecast for the Dolphins, which was not an easy group to come to. I think it could break a couple of different ways with the bottom of this group. You're not going to be surprised to hear Bradley Chubb and Jaelan Phillips and Chop Robinson as the top three guys on the edge. They brought back Quentin Bell, who played some meaningful snaps for you, has a special teams value and I think as an early down player, can be a guy that spells some of those guys if you want him to, and had a nice emergence. So Quentin Bell is the fourth edge. I have two more edges making the roster. Grayson Murphy, UDFA from last year, is one. It seems like he certainly popped in training camp last year. There's been some positive reviews from people that I've both read and talked to, who have been in attendance in some of the open practices at OTAs. Looks healthy. He was stashed all year as an injured player. But I go back to that preseason and training camp last year look that we had at Grayson Murphy. Looked like he could have been a nice steal. Him and Mohamed Kamara, I both have making the 53. Kamara hoping for a big jump in year two. You could tell me that Murphy doesn't make it. You could tell me that Kamara doesn't make it. You could tell me that I'd be surprised if neither of them made it. But that was a tough group to kind of decide between maybe a sixth interior defensive lineman or somebody else in the back seven between these two guys and potentially two guys on the defensive interior. The math was hard for me here. I'll be honest, it was. But the five that I had coming on the defensive interior to make the 53 was Kenneth Grant, Zach Sealer, Jordan Phillips, Benito Jones. And I think the last spot for me came down to skill specificity and what you're looking for. And we did a show, it was sometime last month, where we talked about kind of needing the 4-eye, 5-tech base end in odd front type of role player. And the Dolphins added Ben Stilley yesterday. That was announced. He's a familiar face. He was with the Dolphins in 22 and then rode on the practice squad for half the year, and they got plucked off waivers by the Browns and then went to Arizona and played like 250 snaps. So he's kind of had a nice little development and plays that role. But then also Matthew Butler, who the Dolphins picked up off of waivers from the Raiders. There was a regime change there. That was a guy that was a 5th-round pick who obviously had some talent at Tennessee and shakes loose. I think Butler's the kind of guy, and say what you will about the Raiders, at defensive front had been one of the strong suits of the team. And you think about John Jenkins, and obviously they didn't have Christian Wilkins all year last year, but then Adam Butler has become a really nice player, another former Dolphin for the Raiders up front on the defensive interior. So not a lot of opportunity there. I'm picking Matthew Butler. I also left Zeke Biggers off, and I didn't feel good about that either. But between the guys that you have who are A-gap capable players, I'm not going to call them nose tackles, but they're A-gap capable players. Kenneth Grant can play in the A-gap. Benito Jones preferably is an A-gap player. And then you have Jordan Phillips, who can also play in the A-gap. You got a lot of that type of player. Who's the guy who can line up over top of a tackle? Well, from your ends perspective, Chubb can do that. I think Phillips can do that. But you don't have that Agba or Calais Campbell type build. And that's a little bit kind of where I see Kenneth Grant can do that, and that's what makes him really special. I think Jordan Phillips can do some of that, but is preferably not playing over top of tackles. I think he'd be better in a 3-tech if he was going to play in the B-gap. And Benito Jones doesn't really have that length. So Butler's the player who, unless Zeke Biggers comes in and makes a big leap as far as like some of the developmental type stuff, just kind of felt like he was, as the developmental player, the guy that you would like to ideally stash and try to ride through the season and then maybe come back next year and say, hey, you're ready for your opportunity. We just got to get you through the initial cuts as a 7th-round pick. And then we could carry on the practice squad all year. And then if we have injuries, we can elevate you up. That would kind of be how I would choose to do it. But if you told me that you picked Zeke Biggers and either Matthew Butler or Ben Stilley over Murphy or Kamara, like it's a wide open collection. But the number I landed on was 11 guys for the defensive line. And it's a deep group. And I like a lot of the composition, a lot of the young talent, a lot of the potential. The ceiling's going to be determined by the guys up top and how healthy they stay. But I'm looking at my 9th guy on the list, and I'm like, you told me this guy played 350 steps this year. I'd say, okay, like, let's go. We can do this. You feel like we could be a pretty competitive group with this. I'm not going to say we're going to win the Super Bowl or anything like that. Nothing reckless here, but I liked how this group shaped up when I put it amidst all the other cuts to do the jigsaw puzzle and find the right numbers across for 25 guys on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to look at secondary, specifically at corner. Next, we have a mystery man, player to be named, but he's got a 53 spot waiting for him when he signs. We're going to get into that and who else made the cut for me in the secondary next here. Locked on Dolphins. Stick with us. Ever check your bank account and wonder where the heck did all of my money go between dining out, shopping online, and entertainment all at your fingertips on your phone? It's very easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money, though, is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you can stop managing your money and actually start building some wealth. For me, the eye-opening thing was to see just how much money was getting spent on those food delivery two-door services on a monthly basis. It's convenient to just tap the few buttons and get it here, but when it all adds up, it's an eye-opening number. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Cornerbacks. Kader Kohou. Okay. And I think Kader Kohou is a starting capable player. It's a top 2 corner in the NFL. I'm encouraged by the back 8 weeks of the season. I'm encouraged by coming into the same scheme for the first time in 4 years. Not a bad bet to place. And if the stuff that you're betting on up front works out well, Kader Kohou's going to be fine, right? Especially if you're forcing decisions from quarterbacks faster. Veteran free agent to be named. This is the Jalen Ramsey placeholder spot on the roster. Jalen Ramsey this game will play out as long as it needs to for the Dolphins to either come to some conviction or their feet get pushed to the fire with the dominoes that's waiting behind it to make a move and be done with it. Right now, they are putting out that they are, based off the inaction, that they're not facing a lot of pressure to do something ASAP. They're willing to let this process play out itself a little bit. Maybe a team gets a little anxious, trying to figure out the money that they're committing while trying to budget for other stuff, like a veteran free agent corner to be named and to be signed, right? Whether this is Stephon Gilmore or Rasul Douglas or Asante Samuel Jr. or whoever, expectation I have for that player is they're probably going to sign it and be tabbed as a starter, just looking at the rest of the group. I think Artie Burns is a good veteran hedge. He's the third name that I have on this list. He played in this scheme last year in Seattle. Very limited play time. I think he's a good veteran hedge that can get you through a game. But if you're going to say, hey, Artie, strap up, dude, you're playing 800 snaps this year, I think you're just begging to get burned with that psychology, if that's indeed how they do it. Now, the good news is the veteran hedge is bolstered by wave after wave after wave after wave of young guys that are described by the coaches and the team as hungry. Now, we'll see how it comes together, but between Jason Marshall, who's a 5th-round draft pick, and Cam Smith, who's a 2nd-round draft pick, there's physical talent, and then there's Storm Duck, who leapt up past the Cam Smiths of the world last year on the depth chart. There's also Ethan Bonner, who gets rave reviews anytime somebody puts a microphone in front of somebody's face, but we really don't have a proof of concept there yet. I'm keeping 6. And I think that's the right mix when you consider what you have at safety, what your linebacker room looks like as far as what they can do in the underneath areas of the field. I'm keeping 6. And the question is, who gives you the special teams appeal out of this group? Is it Storm Duck? Is it Ethan Bonner? Cam Smith, is that all he's going to be? Or is he going to be a special teams player? Or is he going to be a starter who then pushes Artie Burns down to be the primary special teams corner? A lot of that pressure can fall back on the depth at linebacker and the depth at safety. I have Kohou, veteran to be named, Artie Burns, top 3. Storm Duck, I think, has an inside track with what he did last year. Cam Smith and Jason Marshall are the other 2 that I'm keeping based off their draft pedigree. But if you told me that Ethan Bonner pushes any one of the bottom 3 names off to make the roster, I'd be surprised if Marshall doesn't make it because he's a 5th-round draft pick. And I'd be surprised if Cam Smith doesn't make it because Cam Smith is a 2nd-round draft pick coming into year 3, and they've kind of sent some direct messaging at him like, dude, time to take the pull-ups off, right? We got to grow up here. It was nice to hear that he was back on the field at OTAs this week after it sounded like he pulled up last week and everybody lost their minds, and including me. It's like, dude, year 3, really? But I have Kohou, Vet, Burns, Duck, Cam Smith, Jason Marshall with Ethan Bonner on the bubble and could push probably Storm Duck off if Bonner's healthy and right and plays well, because it seems like he has a lot of fans in the building. But so does Storm Duck. Now, I didn't think the film reflected particularly well on Storm Duck last year, but that's the group that you have. And if you get a veteran, and if you can assume health, which you never can with the Dolphins, but if you assume that there is health, I think it's a compelling group with a vet, potentially 2 vets, hungry Kohou in a contract year, and young guys that somebody's got to step up to the plate. Now, whether or not they do could be make or break for the secondary. But that was the juggling that I had, and I to be honest, took minimum at both linebacker and safety. I could have probably taken 1 less edge and then maybe kept 7 corners and then kept Bonner, or kept, I personally am a big fan of Isaiah Johnson, who was the UDFA last year. Kendall Sheffield, maybe BJ Adams, a UDFA this year. I mean, they're not lying when they say they got competition. And if you're telling me the competition's for spots, ideally 5 and 6 or 5, 6, and 7, depending on how many you keep, I'm really good with that portion of the group. It's the top of the group that the ceiling and the floor is dependent on really a guy we don't even know who it is yet. And that's what's unsettling about the position group. But we're going to get into linebackers and safeties next. Here we took 11 defensive linemen, 6 corners to go with the 25 players yesterday, and Sanders, Stonehouse, and Cardona on special teams. Our last 8 spots on this 53-man roster projection are coming your way next. Make sure you guys stick with us. I don't think there's going to be any surprises in the linebacker room. Now, safety's a little bit of a different story. But if I told you the 4 linebackers that I'm keeping are Jordan Brooks, Tyrell Dotson, Willie Gay, and KJ Britt, are you surprised? This is what year 4 for Channing Tindall. First time he, like Kader Kohou, who's got a repeat scheme. I think that's what Joe Barry communicated during his availability during OTAs earlier last month. That's what I told Channing is, if it's ever going to happen for you, now is the time. Well, I'm not anticipating now to be the time, especially when you consider Britt and Gay and what those guys bring individually for if you, heaven forbid, have an injury to Tyrell Dotson or an injury to Jordan Brooks. I think those guys can platoon and give you pretty decent appeal to survive an extended period from other one of your top 2 guys not being healthy. So KJ Britt in particular, I think has a chance to be a great special teams player for the Dolphins as a depth linebacker. The physicality element that he brings relative to Duke Riley as the special teams linebacker, if it is KJ Britt, which I think he's really well suited for, is monumental. It's a great step in the right direction, and that's as I'm looking at names that are special teams guys like potentially KJ Britt or Willie Gay, or you get into the guys in the safety room that we're going to talk about, or for some of the skill players offensively, if it's continues to be Malik Washington, but put Pharaoh Brown out there. The feel for me is a little different for the physicality of the special teams unit. But a lot of this, I think, is going to end up falling on the back 7 guys on defense. So Brooks, Dotson, Britt, Gay, 4 linebackers to go with the 6 corners and then the 11 defensive linemen. I'm not a math guy, but that's 21, which means we got 4 guys in the secondary, including a cut that really hurt my heart. I'm not going to lie, it did. Speaking of special teams, but it's the same theme as what KJ Britt to Duke Riley. Duke Riley's been a core special teams player for the Dolphins the last several seasons, right? So Ron Neal was that guy. Maybe that's Artie Burns instead of Saron Neal this year, or one of the other guys, whether it's Duck or Bonner or Marshall or whoever. My 4 safeties, Iafitu Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, Dante Trader Jr., and Patrick McMorris, which means I did cut Elijah Campbell, who was a special teams staple for the Dolphins for really the entirety of the Mike McDaniel era. Guy's getting up there in age a little bit as a core special teams guy, has never really made the jump. It sounds like the coaching staff really likes him. And if you told me you kept Elijah Campbell and kept 5 safeties and didn't keep either Grayson Murphy or Muhammad Kamara, I'd sit there and nod my head and say, I totally get it. I see it. These are the hard decisions that you have to make when you're breaking down only 53 spots, right? But for Trader and McMorris, those guys are guys that profile extremely well to special teams. You're hoping one of those guys makes a defensive leap. There are 6th round and 5th round draft choices in the last 2 years with 3 and 4 years respectively of cost control, player control versus Campbell, who's sitting here, you're negotiating $1.5 million contract extensions, 1-year deals on an annual basis for a guy that's pushing 30 that never had the breakthrough. And maybe it's this year for Elijah. I'm just inclined to believe it was going to happen with what the safety room looked like last year. We'd have seen more than 8 snaps of Big Nickel all year. Big Nickel was what I really wanted to see this team play some more of last year. So Melifonwu, Davis kind of penciled in as starters. If you told me either Trader or McMorris jumped into a starting spot before the end of the year, I would not be surprised. They are both very well regarded. They're both good tacklers. They're not super rangy guys, but that's not really the book on. You're not playing high post and going sideline to sideline outside the numbers 40 yards downfield. That's not really what they're asking this group to do. And they're both great tacklers. And you have that player in Ashton Davis. So that's the 25 that I have on defense. It's Grant Sealer, Jordan Phillips, Benito Jones, Matthew Butler at defensive tackle. Zeke Biggers first off for me. Really wanted to find a spot. Chubb, Phillips, Chop, Quentin Bell, Grayson Murphy, Muhammad Kamara as the edge guys. You could tell me either Murphy or Kamara is off coming into year 2 based off of how little we saw from Kamara, and Murphy's a UDFA. It's not owed anything, and I totally get it. But that's 11. Brooks, Dotson, Britt Gay as the 4 linebackers. That's 15. 6 corners, Kohou, veteran to be named, Burns, Storm Duck, Cam Smith, Jason Marshall was my 5. 6. Ethan Bonner was first off in that regard. And then Iafitu Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, Dante Trader, Patrick McMorris with Elijah Campbell, the first off in the safety room. I think it bodes pretty well that 4 out of the 3 out of 5 spots on defense, the first guy off, like I was kind of mad I couldn't find a spot for. Now that's the depth, right? And we don't really need to know the depth right now. We need to figure out who's taking the snaps and what the floor and the ceiling is of the snaps, not the depth of the roster. But it was a little eye-opening to me to kind of get through this process, especially compared to offense, where I didn't think there were too many difficult decisions. There were some difficult decisions to make on defense. And like maybe you take a spot away from an Andrew Meyer and you keep 8 offensive linemen and you keep an extra one of those defensive guys and go 26-24 split. But there's a lot of ball game left, right? We got mandatory minicamp starting on Tuesday next week. But I thought end of OTAs, now's a good time. I haven't really done this all season since before free agency, really. Do a 53 forecast, take a look at it. I hope you guys enjoyed, but that's going to do it for me here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys for checking the show. Make it a great rest of your Friday. Make it a great weekend. I'll be back to talk to you all again on Monday, unless we get some big news between now and then, in which case you'll see me on your feed soon. Kyle Krabs, go Fins.